18 grand a month? Seriously? That's insane. I was at a loss for words. It was a mixer at the weekend. I only came as a favor to a coworker, a simple making up the numbers, and yet here I was, getting this blatant criticism thrown at me. You're not temping or working part-time, right? Being a full-time employee with that salary is ridiculous. What about your future? I mean, even if you get a girlfriend, you probably can't afford to pay for dates. Maria, with her glitzy nails, and Nicole, with her curled hair and heavy makeup, were laughing across the table. The table was lined with beers and cocktails, but I couldn't bring myself to take a single sip. Their looks, a mix of amusement and disdain, cut through me, leaving a chill running down my back. Sorry, I just remembered something I need to take care of. As I stood up, Maria let out a scoff through her nose, glaring up at me with her elbows still resting on the table. Fine, but leave your share of the bill. We're not covering for you. As if on cue, Nicole leaned over to whisper, right? Totally useless. Silently, I pulled out a few notes from my wallet and placed them on the edge of the table. This was supposed to be a fun night, but it couldn't have gone more wrong. Kyle, my dependable senior colleague, leaned over and muttered, "Sorry, Tyler." But I didn't feel like saying a word. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. That was all that consumed my mind. But a few days later, when I showed up at work, their faces turned pale. No way. But you said your salary was only 18 grand a month. It was the beginning of their downfall. My name is Tyler. I'm a 29-year-old guy working at a major company in Tokyo. I belong to a department that handles overseas projects. Most of the work is low profile, consisting of mundane clerical tasks. So I usually don't stand out. Even in this unassuming role, I find a sense of purpose. I handle things like sorting documents from overseas, data entry, and proofreading reports. Knowing that these small, precise tasks keep projects running smoothly makes it impossible to cut corners. Even the tiniest mistake could lead to major issues down the line. Some may call it dull, but I firmly believe that being the backbone that supports the company is essential. That belief is what drives me to take pride in my work. While my job might not appear flashy, I'm convinced it will lead to bigger results someday. Outside of work, my life is just as low-key, mostly going back and forth between the office and my apartment. While I don't mind hanging out with friends, I've never been a fan of events like meeting strangers over drinks. Yet, somehow. Tyler, come on. I'm begging you. Last Friday, during lunch at the company cafeteria, Kyle, who's a year older than me, clasped his hands together as if praying. Kyle works in the sales department, separate from mine, but he's always been like an older brother to me. Cheerful and sociable, with a wide network of connections. Unlike me, he thrives in social settings, absolutely loving drinking parties and events. I'm not exactly the life of the party, I said while eating cold noodles. Kyle laughed. I'm not asking you to be the entertainer. We're short on people, man. Someone bailed on us last minute. It's a mixer with women from our company, different departments. So you probably don't know them. They're all receptionists, and I hear they're gorgeous. Don't you want to chat with some cute girls for a change? From the way Kyle asked, it was clear that saying no would only make things complicated later. More importantly, he was a senior colleague who had helped me out many times, both professionally and personally. Coldly brushing him off with something like, "Why don't you just go by yourself," didn't sit right with me. All right. But don't expect too much from me, okay? Half-heartedly, I gave in, and so, with little enthusiasm, I found myself heading into the weekend. On Saturday night, I arrived at the designated restaurant to find Kyle waiting by the entrance. They're supposed to be receptionists. So I bet they're all pretty flashy. Just relax and have fun, alright? The staff led us to a semi-private booth at the back of the restaurant, where 3 women were already seated. At first glance, they were all undeniably beautiful. Among them, the woman sitting in the center, Maria, immediately stood out as someone who clearly enjoyed making herself look good. Her curled hair, sparkly nails, and glittery eyeshadow were impossible to miss. The designer bag she carried only added to her commanding presence. "Hi, I'm Kyle, and this is my colleague, Tyler. Thanks for joining us tonight," Kyle said with his usual lively charm. Maria responded with a bright smile, "I'm Maria." Beside her were Nicole, equally flashy, and Michelle, who seemed more reserved. All three were in the same company but in different departments, so although they had met, this was the first time they had ever talked properly. "Nice to meet you. I'm Tyler," I said with a polite bow. Maria's eyes swept over me from head to toe, and she gave a faint smile. It was the kind of smile that hinted at an unspoken evaluation, and it made me uneasy. For now, we raised our glasses for a toast. "Cheers!" Kyle called out enthusiastically, leading the group as we clinked glasses and took our first sips. Barely a moment later, Maria took control of the conversation. "So, Kyle, you're in sales, right? You must make good money?" "Well, it's all right. I spend most of my time out meeting clients, so I get a little commission here and there. Nothing crazy, though." Kyle can respond to these salary questions with ease and wit. He must be used to it. Meanwhile, I sat back, quietly listening, once again reminded of how out of place I felt in settings like this. And then, as expected, the attention turned to me. "What about you, Tyler? What kind of work do you do? I know you're at the same company, but we're in different departments, so I'm curious." Maria's eyes gleamed with a sharp, piercing light. Nicole leaned forward eagerly, adding, "Something to do with overseas stuff, right?" Michelle, on the other hand, looked down awkwardly, as though she wanted to disappear. Yeah, I mostly do behind-the-scenes clerical work. It's nothing special." But you're in the overseas division, right?" "Yeah, sometimes my job involves working with overseas clients, but it's just standard office work." Maria's lips curled into a grin. "So, what does standard mean, exactly?" Letting out a small sigh, I answered honestly, "If we're talking salary, it's around 18 grand a month." At that moment, Maria and Nicole exchanged wide-eyed looks before bursting into laughter. 18 grand? Are you serious? And you're a full-time employee? Not temping or part-timing?" Maria's voice was filled with obvious mockery. Nicole chimed in, laughing, "I mean, you'd have to live with your parents to make that work, right?" The atmosphere grew tense as all eyes focused on me. Kyle tried to intervene, saying, "Hey, everyone's situation is different, you know," but Maria wasn't letting up. "So, what are you going to do? With that kind of salary, can you even afford dates if you get a girlfriend? Seriously, this is unbelievable. The part-timers working for me probably make more money than you." "Well, no, I wouldn't go that far." Before Kyle could finish his sentence, Maria cut him off, propping her elbow on the table and looking down at me as she spoke. "And honestly, at 29 years old, only making 18 grand a month? That's pretty rough. Do you even have a plan for your future? Because I'd never date a guy like that." Her words were sharper than I had anticipated. As I sat there in silence, Nicole smirked and nodded in agreement. "Right? Totally." Michelle, the only one who looked slightly uncomfortable, gave a weak, apologetic smile but said nothing. By this point, I couldn't take it anymore. The humiliation was unbearable. If income is such a big deal to them, I honestly wish they wouldn't bother attending mixers in the first place. "Hey, Maria, I know you've been drinking, but don't you think you're going a little too far?" Kyle tried to step in, but Maria just scoffed and fired back. "Oh, come on. It's the truth. Besides, being blunt like this saves everyone's time." At that point, I realized there was no point in staying any longer and decided to leave. I finished my drink in one gulp, grabbed my wallet, and stood up. Sorry, I just remembered something I need to take care of. I'll head out now. Oh? Then just leave if you want. But make sure to leave your share of the bill. We don't want to lose out. Maria said with a cold smirk, exchanging glances with Nicole before muttering, "Oh, so useless." Kyle called out, "Hey, Tyler, wait a second," but I was already determined to get out of there as fast as possible. I placed some cash on the table and said, "Sorry, Kyle, see you later," then left the restaurant. As I walked away, I could hear Maria laughing behind me, saying, "Seriously, what was even the point of him showing up?" Hilarious. Honestly, I can't say I don't feel frustrated or ashamed, but more than that, I feel like getting involved is just a waste of time. When I stepped outside, the weekend crowd and humid night air were a far cry from the stifling atmosphere of the restaurant. The sticky humidity and the noisy bustle of the streets clung to my skin. I decided to catch a train home and started walking briskly. Then I heard the sound of footsteps running toward me from behind. "Tyler, wait." I turned around to see Michelle, flustered and out of breath, hurrying toward me. She clutched a small bag and wore a modest outfit, looking slightly panicked. I'm sorry. Maria went too far." "Oh, you don't have to apologize. It's not your fault. I just wasn't a good match for the group," I said with a wry smile. To be honest, Michelle hadn't said or done anything hurtful. She just sat there looking awkward. But I laughed back there, and I couldn't say anything to stop it. "I feel awful for not doing anything. Please don't be upset." She bowed her head apologetically. I responded, "It's fine, really. Don't worry about it. You should probably get back, though. Or Maria might get mad." "You're right. Sorry again." "Excuse me." Michelle gave another small bow before heading back toward the restaurant. I watched her small figure disappear into the crowd, then continued walking toward the subway station. I got home before 10 p.m. After taking a shower, I grabbed some iced tea from the fridge and stared blankly at my phone. That's when Kyle called. "Hey, Tyler. I'm sorry about earlier. I'd heard Maria could be tough, but I didn't think she'd be that bad." Kyle sounded apologetic, with a hint of exasperation in his voice. "Don't worry about it. It's not your fault, Kyle. And sorry for leaving so suddenly." "No, seriously, it's fine. I feel bad for inviting you and letting that happen. But honestly, Maria would have treated anyone the same way. She's all about money. Even after you left, she kept going on about how you are boring and probably earns next to nothing. It was ridiculous." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Yeah, I guess mixers just aren't for me. Don't invite me to any more for a while, okay? Got it. I'm sorry again. But don't let it get to you, alright? You don't have much to do with those two at work anyway, so just let it go." "I will." Michelle did apologize, but honestly, I just don't think I have any connection with those people. When I said that, Kyle seemed slightly relieved. "Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry again, Tyler. See you next week at work." After hanging up, I leaned back on the couch in the living room. I never thought a weekend night could be this draining. Attending a so-called mixer, only to be insulted, is not something I ever want to experience again. But it's over now. At least Kyle won't be inviting me to anything like that anytime soon, and I probably won't run into those three again. We work in different departments, and it's not like we run into each other often in such a big office. Or so I thought, until a few days later. A company-wide email announced a major meeting to unveil a new project for the overseas division, involving subsidiaries and high-ranking executives. It seems like this meeting is going to be truly massive. Apparently, it will include international guests and executives, with a presentation taking place in a large rented hall. And I was one of the people scheduled to present. And then, the day of the company-wide meeting arrived. The venue was a spacious hall in a downtown building. At the entrance, I could see staff from not only our headquarters but also affiliated subsidiaries and what appeared to be temp staff, all mixed together. I wore the company-issued name badge around my neck, carrying my materials as I made my way to my assigned seat. A quick glance toward the front of the hall revealed a few familiar figures near the side of the stage. Bright, curled hair and flashy, painted nails. It was Maria and Nicole. The two seemed to be helping guide VIP guests under the staff's direction, flashing their ID badges as they moved around. A little behind them was a woman dressed modestly, clutching a folder, Michelle, I assumed. Seeing the three of them together instantly brought back memories of the disastrous mixer, and I felt a headache creeping in. The meeting reached its midpoint, and it was finally time for the session on our overseas business division. The host took the mic, and the screen on stage lit up with the title, New Project Presentation, Overseas Business Division. I could sense a murmur ripple through the audience. And now, to introduce the new project, here is the recently promoted team leader of global planning in the Overseas Business Division, Tyler. At that moment, a spotlight hit the stage. The brightness made me squint for a moment, but I knew this was my time to shine. Standing up, I walked to the center of the stage and gave a polite bow. Applause filled the room. Yes, I had been selected as the leader of this project. This project aims to strengthen collaboration across multiple overseas locations while upgrading our existing services. For instance, as I spoke, the screen transitioned to colorful graphs and charts. The slides progressed smoothly, and during the Q&A session, both Japanese executives and international guests alternated with their questions. After addressing the audience in English, I concluded with, "That concludes my report. Thank you very much." With a deep bow. I felt the spotlight on the stage shine a little too brightly. Bowing deeply, I felt the stage lights glaring down on me once again. From the packed hall, I could hear an uncontrollable wave of murmurs and applause. The extended Q&A session meant the next presenter's turn was approaching. Feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion, I walked off stage. The meeting wrapped up about 2 hours later. As the lengthy program concluded and the final remarks echoed through the hall, a round of applause filled the room. I caught the eyes of some colleagues near the reception area, sharing a smile that said, "Glad that's over." Guests from overseas began heading toward the lobby, guided by staff. That's when Kyle spotted me and hurried over. "Tyler, congrats. You are the team leader? That's amazing. You nailed it up there." As he said that, he seemed genuinely happy, as if it were his own achievement. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I replied, "Thank you, but it still doesn't feel real yet." Just then, Maria and Nicole approached, their eyes darting nervously. "Tyler? Team leader? That project presentation earlier, that was really you?" Maria's voice was tinged with disbelief. Nicole covered her mouth in shock. "You were presenting at such a big event, and in English, too. That's incredible. Where did the person go who mocked me at that mixer, treating me like a boring guy who only makes 18 grand a month?" Kyle, grinning mischievously, decided to chime in. "Yeah, Tyler's amazing, right? Bet you two are surprised, huh?" Maria and Nicole fumbled to respond. "Well, we didn't really." But Kyle wasn't letting up. "By the way, at that mixer, you guys were laughing at Tyler, calling him a boring guy who makes 18 grand a month, right? Well, guess what? That was in dollars." "Dollars?" Both Maria and Nicole's eyes widened in unison. I tried to stop him, stammering, "Hey, Kyle, that's enough," but he just kept going. "Yep. His monthly salary is $18,000. If you convert that to yen, well, you can do the math. Let's just say it's quite a hefty sum." Before he could finish, Nicole froze. Wait, that's no way. $18,000? Maria turned pale as she stammered, that's over 20 million yen a year. Watching the two women, who had once mocked me, now visibly shaken, was complicated, to say the least. Wait a second. Back then, you said your monthly income was around 18 grand. Maria tried her best to come up with excuses, her voice desperate, but Kyle simply shrugged beside me. Well, Tyler wasn't lying. He just didn't specify whether it was dollars or yen. Honestly, though, I couldn't keep quiet after how bad that mixer went. Seeing such an incredible guy like him get mocked like that, yeah, it pissed me off. Kyle turned to me with a sly grin and teased, "Man, they really let a big fish slip away, huh?" Maria and Nicole turned beet red, avoiding eye contact as they stammered over their words. No, it wasn't like that, not at all. Yeah, it was, just a joke, you know? Gone was the confident attitude they had displayed on the mixer. Well, we should get going. With that, Maria and Nicole hurried off, almost fleeing from the scene. Once they were gone, I turned to Kyle and whispered, "That was a bit much, don't you think?" "You didn't have to bring up the whole dollars thing." "Yeah, sorry about that. But man, I couldn't hold it in. I've been annoyed since that night, watching them talk down to you like that. It was too satisfying not to say something." Kyle laughs cheerfully, looking completely refreshed. Seeing that expression, I lost the urge to say anything more. Sure, I had a bad experience at the mixer the other day. But Kyle must have also felt bad as the organizer about how things ended on such a sour note. Alright, fine. But let's keep things under wraps next time, okay? I really don't want that kind of attention spreading. Yeah, I hear you. Although, it's probably too late for that. Maria and Nicole are bound to tell someone. Kyle joked, shrugging. Surprisingly, I didn't feel as annoyed as I thought I would. In the past, I might have worried about the drama. But now, I felt oddly at peace. It wasn't just the promotion or the project leadership, it was the confidence that came with knowing I was trusted to handle something this important. What Maria and Nicole thought of me didn't matter. As long as I stayed true to my work and myself, that was enough. A few days later. Hey, Tyler. I heard the project's going really well. You've got such an important role, it's honestly so cool. It was lunchtime, and I was at my desk reviewing documents when Maria and Nicole approached me with unnaturally cheerful expressions. The same two women who had mocked me relentlessly at the mixer were now all smiles and overly polite. Maria tilted her head with a sweet, almost coy look, her brightly dyed hair swaying as she spoke. Your presentation at the meeting was amazing. We saw you interacting with the international guests in English, it was so impressive. Honestly, we were blown away by how perfect you were. Nicole nodded eagerly beside her. Yeah, totally. It was incredible. You're such a reliable team leader, everyone's been saying how much they trust you. Their flattery was obvious, but I could tell it wasn't just praise, they had an ulterior motive. Sure enough, they exchanged glances and in unison launched into their real pitch. So, Tyler, we were thinking, how about we go out for dinner sometime? You know, to celebrate your promotion and hear more about your work. Yeah, Maria and I were just saying how busy you must be. That's why we thought it'd be nice to help you relax a little. Maria's tone carries a hint of sweetness, while Nicole nods beside her, saying, right? Right? At the mixer the other day, they were laughing endlessly about how a monthly income of 18 grand is unbelievable, but honestly, their nerve, or should I say, their sudden change of attitude, is astonishing. I set my pen down and turned to face them, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. Thanks for the invitation, but I'm swamped with the new project right now. My schedule's completely full, so it's a bit tough. Frankly, I felt no obligation to humor them. Maria furrowed her brows slightly, giving me a pleading look as she leaned in. Oh, but can't you find a little time? It doesn't have to be right away, whenever your schedule clears up, we're totally free. Yeah, we'd love to learn from you, Tyler. Nicole added, flashing an overly bright smile. No matter how polite or eager they seemed, remembering their past behavior left me completely uninterested. Thanks, I appreciate it. Maybe someday, when things settle down. I kept my response non-committal, showing no intention of accepting their offer. Realizing they weren't getting anywhere, Maria and Nicole exchanged disappointed glances before retreating. Well, let us know when you have time. Okay? We'll be waiting. As they walked away, I watched their retreating figures disappear across the office floor. Finally, I let out a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Seriously, after all that, they still have the nerve. My colleagues at nearby desks, who had clearly overheard the interaction, gave me knowing smirks and exchanged quiet chuckles. Many people at the party seemed to know those women, and everyone exchanged exasperated glances. As I sighed and stared at the monitor, I suddenly felt someone's presence. When I looked up, a familiar, reserved woman was standing there, Michelle. She was holding several files in her arms. Tyler, I'm sorry. I just brought these documents over for you, she said in a soft voice. I replied with a simple thanks and took the files from her. There were a few thick sets of documents. They seemed to be some kind of procedural forms, and she briefly explained the content. And also, after finishing her explanation, she hesitated for a moment, lowering her lashes. I could tell she was a bit nervous. About the other day. I'm really sorry. I must have made you feel uncomfortable. Her words left me feeling uneasy. Honestly, she was almost dragged into the situation, and if anything, I wasn't the only one who felt out of place back then. Still, for her to come all the way to apologize like this, it must have weighed heavily on her mind. Don't worry about it. I think it was just that I didn't vibe with the atmosphere. If anything, you have nothing to apologize for. As I spoke, I recalled the party. While Maria and Nicole kept laughing, Michelle had looked uncomfortable, her gaze often cast downward. I also remembered how, after the party ended, she went out of her way to catch up to me and apologize. Knowing that it still bothered her made me feel bad for her. No, I laughed along with them back then and let myself get carried away without saying anything. I'm really not good with those situations. But I couldn't refuse. That's why I wanted to properly apologize to you. Michelle bowed her head slightly as she said this. Her modest demeanor reflected her personality well. Just the fact that she came to see me like this was enough to leave me with no hard feelings. If anything, I was reminded of how sincere a person she was. Thank you. Really, it's fine. If anything, I might have said something rude back there too, and it's not like anything worse happened. I feel bad that you even felt like you needed to apologize. When I said that, she let out a relieved sigh. The tension seemed to ease just a little, and a faint smile appeared on her lips. I'm glad. Even though I knew you weren't upset, it was eating at me. I felt so disappointed in myself. Though a trace of guilt still lingered in her eyes, I thought she had done more than enough. Just having this conversation allowed me to let go of the awkwardness from that night. We'll probably run into each other often, so let's make sure we can work together comfortably. Let's just leave that night behind us, I said, lightly tapping the files with my fingers. Hearing that, Michelle smiled warmly, bowed deeply, and said, Thank you so much. Well, I'll take my leave now. Sorry to bother you while you were busy. Before leaving, she pointed out one of the checklist items on the materials she had brought over and added, If you have any questions about the content, please let me know. Then she walked away. As I watched her go, I naturally turned my attention back to my desk. Thanks to her sincere apology, the unpleasant memory of that awkward party seemed to fade quite a bit. In relationships, some people only care about money or status, while others genuinely try to connect. This was undeniably true. All right. Somehow, my mood felt a little lighter. Returning to the overwhelming project documents displayed on my monitor, I felt like I had finally put that night's bad aftertaste to rest. Then, one day, I needed to check some administrative documents related to a new project and had to visit the relevant department. When I arrived at the floor, Maria and Nicole were standing near the reception desk. I considered walking past unnoticed, but they spotted me immediately. Their faces lit up instantly. "Tyler, you look busy as usual, great job." "Oh, it's really you, Tyler. Hey, by the way, weren't those materials from the overseas client crazy thick? That must have been tough." "Ha!" As always, they approached me with no regard for my schedule, diving into conversation. Their attitude was drastically different from how they acted right after the party, now overly cheerful and friendly. I internally chuckled at their change in demeanor but reminded myself that I still had work to get done. I had decided to keep the conversation to the bare minimum since I was just here to pick up some documents. I'm here for some interdepartmental coordination. Is the person in charge?" Just as I began to speak, I heard a voice laced with anger coming from the back. "Michelle, is it still not done? I told you to have those documents ready ages ago. This is way too slow." Glancing toward the source of the voice, I noticed Michelle, surrounded by a mountain of papers, shrinking behind a desk in what looked like a cramped storage area. She looked visibly intimidated, her eyebrows drooping apologetically. I'm so sorry. I'll get it done right away. Just a little more time, please." "Excuse me? Stop making excuses and just finish it already. This is why people think you can't do your job." Maria's sharp, domineering voice rang out, relentless. From the outside, it looked less like a supervisor reprimanding a subordinate and more like outright bullying. I had gotten the same vibe during the mixer. Maria was the kind of person who would go after anyone she deemed weaker. Nicole, standing nearby, didn't bother to intervene. She seemed too caught up in Maria's influence to stop her. After a brief hesitation, I decided to approach Michelle, thinking she might have the documents I needed. "Ah, Tyler, I'm so sorry. I was just about to finish them." She scrambled to her feet but lost her balance, causing some of the papers she was holding to scatter across the floor. As the papers fluttered down, I instinctively bent down to help gather them. Maria, watching this, let out an exaggerated sigh and spoke in a condescending tone. "Seriously? So clumsy. Hurry up and clean it up. Stop making Tyler waste his time on you." "I'm so sorry, Tyler. Really, I'll put it together right away." Seeing Michelle bow apologetically, I shook my head. "You don't need to apologize. It's my fault for rushing you. Just calm down." As I tried to help, she hesitated slightly, unsure whether to accept my help. I remembered how apologetic she'd been during the mixer. Seeing her work now, it was obvious she was hardworking and sincere. So why was she being treated this poorly? "Hey, Tyler, why don't you come over here? Let's talk." Maria suddenly cut in, her tone intentionally drawing attention to herself. Nicole chimed in, Yeah. Tyler's busy. He doesn't have time for this kind of stuff, right?" "No, I'm the one who came to pick up the documents, so it's fine. Besides, it'd be unfair to leave it all to Michelle." I ignored them and continued helping Michelle pick up the scattered papers. "I'm sorry." Hearing her quiet apology, I asked her something that had been on my mind. "Why are you the only one handling this? Couldn't this be done much faster if everyone pitched in?" Michelle gave a strained smile and replied in a hushed voice. "Well, I'm a temp. So handling these tasks is part of my job. I can't really say no." Her voice was so soft I had to strain to hear her, but the pain and frustration were evident. I hadn't thought much about it during the mixer, but it dawned on me now, her position and status at work must be incredibly unstable. In recent years, I'd heard stories about major companies treating temp workers poorly, and this seemed like a textbook example. Maria's and Nicole's attitudes made it all too clear. I see. I let out a sigh as Maria popped her head out again, calling out, "Tyler. So you've got the documents now, right? Great. Let's grab dinner sometime. Okay?" Nicole added, "Yes, yes. Let's do that," while waving cheerfully. Yeah, I replied vaguely, offering a half smile. "I'll go check the documents," I said, excusing myself and leaving the room. I heard Maria and Nicole giggling and chatting behind me, but I chose to tune them out. Carrying a stack of files in both hands, I stepped into the elevator, feeling a knot of frustration in my chest. Something about this whole situation left me deeply unsettled. As I walked down the hallway toward the meeting room, Michelle's image lingered in my mind. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Tyler." Turning around, I saw Michelle running toward me, slightly out of breath as she caught up. She must have hurriedly put the papers away because she was still a little flushed. "I'm sorry for all the commotion earlier." Tyler, if there's anything wrong with the documents, please let me know. I want to make sure I did everything correctly." I couldn't help but give a wry smile as I watched her timidly avoiding eye contact. Was she worried about her own mistake, or was it what happened earlier with Maria that was bothering her? Maybe it was both. "I'll check on it. Thanks for going out of your way to catch up with me." When I stopped walking and said this, Michelle spoke hesitantly, looking apologetic. "I'm always getting scolded like that. It's so embarrassing. And honestly, Maria and I aren't really friends. I was only invited to the mixer to even out the numbers. There's this rumor that if you cross Maria, you'll get fired." So, it was true. That explains why she seemed out of place at the mixer. She feels forced to fit in, but deep down, she hates it. And for someone like her, a temp worker, going against full-time employees like Maria and her clique isn't an option. It's easy to imagine the kind of pressure she's under. But that doesn't make it okay for them to treat you like that. You don't have to put up with something so unreasonable. Before I could finish, Michelle looked down, clutching her file tightly to her chest. "My mom's sick, and I really can't afford to lose this job. I've been through a few temp placements, but the pay and benefits here are still better than most. So I don't have the courage to fight back." It's pathetic, isn't it? She let out a small, dry laugh. "It's not pathetic at all." The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them, and Michelle looked up, blinking in surprise. "At the very least, I'm glad I got to meet you. That mixer was awful, but because of you, I was able to move forward." Even I was surprised by how straightforward I sounded. It felt a little embarrassing. "Tyler. Thank you. Hearing that, it really helps." Her voice sounded faintly shaky. I exhaled slowly and gave her a gentle smile. "We're colleagues, even if we're in different roles. If anything ever happens, don't hesitate to come to me, okay?" "Okay. I will." Michelle gave a small nod. "Well then, see you. Good luck with work." "Thank you." And with that, we both returned to our respective tasks. A few days later, with the flood of new project materials and meetings, staying at work until nearly midnight had become routine for me. The few remaining employees in the office all carried a noticeable air of exhaustion. Around 10 p.m., I finally finished replying to emails and stood up from my desk. The office lights began to turn off, one section after another, plunging areas into darkness. Phew! After hours of working on the computer, my shoulders felt unbearably stiff. As I stretched my back slightly and walked down the hallway to leave the room, I heard the faint sound of someone shuffling papers in the distance. It was a little early for the night security staff to start their rounds. Curious to see who else was still here, I headed toward the sound. There she was, Michelle. Stacks of files towered on her desk, and even cardboard boxes were lined up nearby. It looked like an absurd amount of work. Was it a different task from what she was saddled with before, or just a continuation of it? Either way, it was clearly too much. Michelle. I called out instinctively, and she turned around, startled. Faint dark circles under her eyes hinted at how tired she was. Oh, Tyler. You're still here? I could say the same for you. It's already past 10. Are you sure you're okay working this late? Yeah. Some additional tasks came up related to paperwork. I have to get these done by tomorrow morning. She shrugged apologetically. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. It was obvious someone had dumped this work on her. Why are you handling all this on your own? Weren't these documents Maria and her team's responsibility? They were, originally. But suddenly, they just said, "You can take it from here." I couldn't say no. As she looked down while explaining, her expression reminded me of the uneasy look she had at the mixer. Once again, someone must have taken advantage of her kindness or her vulnerable position and clocked out early, leaving everything to her. Ah, I knew it. Honestly, how can they keep piling on so much unreasonable work? Is there anything I can help with? I've already wrapped up my work for today, and I've still got time before the last train, so I can lend a hand. What? No, I couldn't possibly ask you to. You're a supervisor, Tyler. It wouldn't be right for you to help with this kind of busy work. Titles don't matter. If I leave you to handle this alone, you'll barely make the last train, right? I shook my head, half in exasperation, as she muttered hesitantly, but clearly unsure of what to do. Just let me help. The faster we finish together, the better. I'll get back into work mode for a little while, and if we focus, we won't be here too late. I pulled over an empty chair from the corner of the desk. As she stammered, "I'm so sorry. Thank you so much," over and over. I listened to her brief explanation of the tasks and began sorting through the documents quickly and efficiently. After about 30 minutes, we finally finished. With the last check complete, Michelle let out a deep sigh and smiled, though she looked tired. That's everything. Thank you so much, Tyler. You really saved me. You're welcome. Well then, it's pretty late. How about we grab a bite to eat before heading home? There's a 24-hour spot near the station where we can get something light. Only if you're okay with it, though. The moment I said it, a hint of embarrassment crept over me. Michelle, surprised, widened her eyes, but soon relaxed and gave a faint smile. If it's not too much trouble. I'd like that. I'm actually a little hungry. Great. Let's wrap things up here, tidy the desk, turn off the lights, and handle the sign-out process before we go. Okay. Her reply sounded much more energetic this time. Her smile, though tinged with fatigue, carried a sense of relief and gratitude. We headed to a 24-hour chain restaurant near the station. Once again, thank you so much for tonight. Not only for helping me with the work but also for staying out so late to have dinner with me. I feel like I owe you something in return. No need for that. Don't be so formal. I helped out because I wanted to, and dinner wasn't a reward, it's just something I wanted to do. But, seeing her hesitate, I added quietly. Look, the point is that sitting here and having a meal together might help relieve some of the stress from work. That's what matters, isn't it? To be honest, I've been so caught up in this project that I haven't had much time to just talk to people. I needed this too. While waiting for the food, she began to share bits and pieces about her life. She mentioned how her mother's health had stabilized recently, but with caregiving expenses being so high, She needed to continue working somewhere with decent pay, even if only as a temp. What about you, Tyler? Isn't it tough handling the new project? I heard you were put in charge of it. Well, it's not easy, but it's rewarding. Dealing with overseas clients can be a challenge, and the English meetings are mentally exhausting. But when you deliver results, the recognition and the pay is worth it. I see. Even people higher up the ladder have their own struggles. Yeah. Is that why you downplayed your salary at the mixer? I gave a wry smile, remembering the moment she referred to. Ah, that. Yeah, honestly, not just at that mixer but most of the time, I either downplay it or avoid the topic altogether. Being in the international business division comes with its share of nosy questions. Plus, my dad ran a fairly successful business. So we grew up well off. I never really experienced financial struggles as a kid. But because of that, I started questioning whether people saw me for who I was or for what my family could offer. I see. As I got older, it became more obvious there were people who approached me just for money. Since then, I've been reluctant, scared to share the truth about my background. I keep wondering if people would change their attitude toward me if they knew. As I lowered my voice to finish, I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I was all too aware that I was revealing something I hadn't shared with anyone before. While I truly appreciated my friends and colleagues, I hadn't been able to discuss this deep-rooted fear with anyone. But I'm not one of those people. Meeting you has been a blessing for me, Tyler. Michelle lifted her head as she said this. Sure, there are people like that. But not everyone around you is like them. At the very least. I'm not. Her voice was small, and her cheeks flushed slightly as she spoke. As the clock passed 11:30 p.m., I decided it was time to wrap things up and head home to avoid affecting tomorrow, so I settled the bill. She suggested we split the bill, but since I was the one who invited her today, I went ahead and paid for everything up front. Wait, but... I'm so sorry. Don't worry about it. Let me be the senior for once. If there's a next time, you can treat me. Sure, if anything comes up, I'll let you know. Michelle said, stumbling over her words. I couldn't help but feel a laugh bubbling up inside me. Her hair swayed gently in the night breeze, faintly illuminated by the glow of the city lights. Just minutes ago, she'd been surrounded by mountains of paperwork. It was hard to believe this was the same person. Maybe, just maybe, the ability to trust someone wholeheartedly begins with small, quiet moments like this. Regardless of how busy or high-stakes life might be. With that thought, I walked beside her toward the station. A few days later, I was working through emails at my desk when I noticed Michelle approaching. She was carrying a file and wore a slightly nervous expression. Tyler, I'm sorry to bother you when you're busy. It's fine. I just finished up something, so don't worry. What's up? She pulled a small envelope from her bag and held it out to me. Actually, I received these meal vouchers for a restaurant. A client gave them to me for event use, but there's no way I can use them all on my own. As she explained, her cheeks turned a faint shade of pink. It was a voucher for a high-end restaurant, as evident by the embossed logo on the card inside the envelope. I was thinking, if you'd like, I'd really like to go with you as a thank you for the other day. That is, if it's not a bother. Oh, it's not a bother at all. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad. How about this weekend? That works for me. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, I'll message you the time later. Thank you again, she said before quickly walking off, still holding her materials. Her steps seemed lighter than usual, almost like she was skipping away. Watching her retreating figure, I felt a strange warmth welling up in my chest. My gaze drifted down to the envelope in my hand. Sure, it's just a restaurant voucher, I thought, but the fact that she went out of her way to offer it meant something. Smiling to myself, I turned back to my computer. Alright, time to finish up and get ready for the weekend, I murmured, diving back into my project files. The workload with overseas coordination was still heavy, but even the busyness felt more manageable. I have plans to have dinner with Michelle this weekend, just the two of us. Just knowing that is enough to lift my spirits this much, I took a deep breath, acknowledging that fact, and focused on my work. Friday night. We'd agreed to meet at 7 p.m. However, when I looked around near the entrance, Michelle was nowhere to be seen. Checking my phone, I saw no new messages from her. Maybe I arrived a little too early, I thought, as I sat on a nearby chair to wait. Then, from a distance, I saw familiar curled hair swaying as it approached me. Well, if it isn't Tyler. Did I keep you waiting? The voice belonged to Maria. Her glossy curls bounced as she walked toward me, carrying a designer bag and flashing a smug smile. I frowned in confusion. Why is she here? Maria? What are you doing here? Is Michelle with you? When I asked, Maria shrugged her shoulders with an amused look. She couldn't make it. Something came up last minute. So, I'm here in her place. In her place? A sense of dread crept over me. As I stood there frozen, Maria folded her arms and gave me an exaggerated wink. That's right. She said she had some urgent plans come up and couldn't come. But she didn't want the reservation to go to waste. So she asked me to come instead. Maria smirked, the corner of her lips curling upward. Michelle did something like that? So, it's just the two of us tonight. Don't worry, I'll make it worth your while. Maria reached for my arm, but I instinctively stepped back, avoiding her grasp. I couldn't make sense of the situation, but I knew I needed to contact Michelle. I quickly opened my phone and sent her a message. No reply. Not even a read receipt. Maria glanced at it out of the corner of her eye and laughed. It's pointless. There's no use trying to contact her tonight. Well, it looks like it's just the two of us. But hey, why not make the best of it? Let's enjoy dinner. Reluctantly, I found myself following her into the restaurant. Inside, the lighting was warm and subdued, with soft music creating a calm atmosphere. The place was filled with couples and groups of friends, all enjoying their Friday night. We were shown to the reserved table, and I sat down, feeling a weight of frustration and unease. Maria, on the other hand, was beaming as she opened the menu. Wow, this looks delicious. Should we get some wine? She said, humming to herself as she glanced over the options. She glanced at me with an almost teasing smile, clearly in high spirits. But I couldn't share her mood. This was supposed to be a special dinner with Michelle. What on earth had happened to her? We placed some orders, choosing a few dishes and drinks. Then, out of nowhere, Maria leaned in and said, "You know, Tyler, I've fallen for you." Her bold confession froze my thoughts. My confusion must have shown on my face, as Maria chuckled softly and leaned in closer. Why don't you go out with me? You'd be the perfect boyfriend. You're in the overseas business division, making great money, right? Of course you're popular. So that's what this was about. I set my glass down, taking a slow, steady breath before responding. Sorry, but I'm not interested in dating you. It was the only answer I could give. Considering Maria's behavior, it's only natural to think so. Even if she suddenly starts showing affection, it's obvious whether it's just superficial or if she intends to use me as a stepping stone. What? Are you serious? You're turning me down? Maria slams the table with a bang and snaps back at me. Her outburst was loud enough that a few nearby customers turned to look. I'm sorry. The moment I put it into words, her eyes seemed to waver. How dare you dump me? What kind of nerve do you have? I'll make you regret this. She scraped her chair back with a creak and stood up, her heels clicking against the floor. Suddenly, a mocking smirk appeared on her lips as she threw out this parting shot. "Did you know? Michelle's been using you. This whole thing tonight, she's the one who handed it to me. She said, 'You can have him all to yourself tonight.' Isn't that hilarious?" Her words sent a cold, uneasy sensation rippling through me. That's a lie. There's no way Michelle would do that. "Oh, you actually believe that? How naive can you be?" she sneered before striding out of the restaurant. I was left sitting there, staring at the half-eaten food on the table, completely at a loss. What's true and what's not? My thoughts were a chaotic swirl as I stood up, leaving the restaurant behind. The next morning at work, something felt off. As I walked down the hallway to my desk, I could feel several colleagues giving me subtle looks and whispering to each other. As I sat down, feeling an uneasy sense of foreboding, the colleague next to me asked, "Are you okay?" "Huh? What do you mean?" "Well, last night. Maria's been saying you forced yourself on her." There it is. Maria had said she'd make me regret it. I had thought she might pull something, but I hadn't imagined she'd escalate it this far. Glancing over at the General Affairs Teams area, I noticed Maria deliberately speaking in a voice loud enough for me to hear, saying things like, "Last night was really scary, and I was forced to drink." Nicole, though still doubtful, nodded hesitantly, pushed by Maria's forceful demeanor. He hugged me. I didn't know what to do. It seemed she had completely crafted a script. She was likely stacking lies upon lies, aiming to elicit sympathy from everyone around her as the victim. Just then, my phone buzzed with a notification from the company's internal messaging app. It was a slightly urgent message. The higher-up, Timothy, wants to conduct an inquiry. Timothy, an executive in our company, was a key figure overseeing international projects. He was known for his fair character, but when a harassment allegation arises, the company can't simply overlook it. With heavy steps, I walked into the executive's office, where Maria was already seated, acting as though she were both a victim and had a witness on her side. Maria had tears pooling in her half-closed eyes. I was so scared. I said no, but I was stunned as Maria repeated her fabricated story. Her tale was riddled with obvious contradictions, yet she spun them one after another. I didn't do it. I firmly denied the allegations, but Maria began sobbing even louder as though supporting her case. Her overly theatrical act made me feel sick, but I knew reacting emotionally would only work against me. If only there were some objective evidence, but for now, it was just her word against mine. Understood. Tyler, return to your department for now. We'll need to hear more details later. With that final statement, I reluctantly left the room. Walking down the corridor, my entire body felt as heavy as lead. Michelle had taken leave since that incident, and I still hadn't heard from her. I couldn't even tell what position she was taking. Could it be, as Maria claimed, that she really aside for her? That seemed impossible, but a nagging unease lingered in the back of my mind. The following Monday. The morning in the office, which should have been the same as always, felt oddly heavy. There was an unnatural emptiness around my desk. It was clear that everyone was keeping their distance as if avoiding me. The reason was obvious. By Friday last week, the rumor of Maria's claim that I harassed her had spread through the company like wildfire. Like an online scandal, sensational rumors outpaced the actual facts, and overnight, I was branded the perpetrator. To make matters worse, the company, due to the harassment allegations, was apparently considering temporarily removing me as the leader of the overseas project, pending a decision from upper management. Whispers about disciplinary action following corporate policies had begun circulating. I was entirely backed into a corner. No matter how loudly I proclaimed the truth, as long as she kept lying with tears in her eyes, everyone prioritized the victim's account. Damn it! I was about to bury my head in my hands at my desk when suddenly, My work phone buzzed with an incoming call. On the screen was Timothy's name. Tyler, come to the meeting room now. The upper management is deciding on your disciplinary action. His low voice sent a chill down my spine. Could this be it? Was my removal about to become official? The thought filled me with dread. With heavy steps, I took the elevator down and opened the meeting room door, where Timothy, several compliance officers, and HR representatives were waiting. At the table's far end, Maria sat quietly. Good morning. I tried to maintain a calm demeanor as I greeted them, but Timothy, flipping through some documents, began speaking in a composed tone. Given the harassment allegations, the company may have no choice but to remove you from the project immediately. Tyler, if you have any rebuttals or evidence, now is the time to present them. We need to clarify the situation here. All eyes turned toward me. Maria, sitting beside me, feigned a sad expression, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes while keeping her head down. I didn't do anything. There's no way I hugged or pressured her. In fact, last Friday, I was supposed to meet Michelle. Then suddenly, Maria showed up out of nowhere. Before I could finish, Maria broke into sobs. How cruel. To make it sound like I forced myself on him. She cried dramatically. Tears fell from Maria's eyes as if she were playing the role of a tragic victim. I started to feel that, at this rate, my words might lack any credibility. Maybe, it's over for me. Just as I felt my spirit begin to break, it happened. The meeting room door swung open with a bang. Excuse me. It was Michelle who came rushing in, out of breath. Her expression was tenser than I had ever seen before. Yet, her eyes were filled with a determined resolve. That harassment story, it's all a lie from Maria. The sudden accusation caused a stir in the room. Maria clicked her tongue, muttering, "What the hell?" Timothy calmly urged, "Michelle, explain yourself," and Michelle, with trembling hands, pulled out some documents. The restaurant reservation from that day was mine. Maria took the tickets from me. She said, holding up her phone. She displayed the message history with Maria on the screen. The messages showed dates, times, and most damningly, a message from Maria saying, "I'll just take your spot. You don't deserve it anyway. If you don't want to lose your job, you'd better keep quiet." I was too scared to say anything. My mom depends on me, and I can't afford to lose my job. But I can't let Tyler get dragged down because of me. Michelle said that and held out her phone to Timothy. Her hand trembled slightly, and tears welled up in her eyes. Maria's face turned pale as the fabricated story unraveled. Timothy carefully examined the messages and cross-referenced the dates and times. After some time, he closed the file with a thud, letting out a deep sigh before delivering his conclusion. This is outright fabrication. Maria, your claims lack consistency and contradict both Michelle's evidence and testimony. Tyler, the harassment allegations against you are entirely false, and your name is cleared. With those words, the tension in the room dissolved instantly. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders and let out a sigh of relief from the depths of my soul. Fabricating harassment claims. This is a serious matter that the company cannot overlook. Maria will face disciplinary action, which may include termination. Timothy's words were delivered coldly, and Maria's face turned bright red as she screamed, "Why? Why do you believe them? I'm the victim here." But no one gave her cries any serious attention anymore. In the end, Maria was handed a severe punishment, termination, and she stormed out of the meeting room, biting her lip in frustration. By then, rumors of her false harassment claim had already begun circulating throughout the office. While I didn't know what kind of future awaited her, one thing was certain: she was held accountable for her actions. I was fully exonerated from the harassment charges and reinstated as the leader of the overseas project. Misunderstandings among my colleagues cleared up, and the cold stares directed at me gradually softened. After everything had settled, I found myself alone in a quiet corner of the hallway with Michelle. You really saved me. If it weren't for you, I'd have been removed as project leader. Thank you, I said, bowing my head. Michelle looked down apologetically, her voice trembling. At first, Maria threatened me, saying I'd lose my job if I went against her, so I couldn't say anything. But I never thought it would escalate like this. I'm so sorry for what I caused. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she spoke, her voice quivering. She looked fragile. Yet there was a quiet strength in her that I hadn't noticed before. She must have been terrified. And yet, she mustered the courage to tell the truth. Looking at her, there wasn't a shred of blame in me, only gratitude. It's okay. None of this was your fault. You were willing to risk your standing at the company to save me. Thank you. As I spoke, I almost placed a hand gently on her shoulder but quickly pulled it back. After all, we're still at work, and causing any awkward misunderstandings would be a bad idea. Still, I hoped my gratitude came through. She trembled slightly, but then a small, faint smile spread across her face. Then, she pulled something from her pocket. It was a resignation letter. Thank you for everything, she said quietly, handing it to me. I was dumbfounded. I never imagined it would end like this. Wait, hold on a second. Why are you suddenly talking about quitting? I caused trouble for you and the company. I couldn't stop Maria, and I let her lies go unchecked until the very end. So, I feel I need to take responsibility. Her small hands trembled as they gripped the resignation letter. Thanks to her courage in speaking the truth, the damage to me and the company was minimized. And yet, she seemed unable to forgive herself, blaming herself endlessly. Michelle, please don't be hasty about quitting. You're not at fault, and the company needs you. I've seen your work, and it's obvious how much you contribute. Even your colleagues say Michelle is reliable and hardworking, but She tried to push back, but I paused, took a deep breath, and searched for the right words. How could I express my feelings clearly? Despite my hesitation, I knew I had to be honest and sincere. For the first time, I felt it was worth trusting someone. You spoke up for me, even though it might have put you at a disadvantage. That meant so much to me. So, please stay. Let's keep working together. I don't want to lose you. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, she seemed lost for words. But slowly, tears welled up in her eyes, and she gave a small nod. Are you sure? I mean, I'm just a temp, and I'm not that fast at my work. It has to be you. No one else can do what you do. I'll be busy with the new project too, but I want us to support each other openly from now on. I think the company would prefer that as well. So please, don't quit. I realized my voice had gotten a little louder, and a colleague from a nearby desk peeked over, asking, "What's going on?" Flustered, I quickly bowed my head. Sorry, it's nothing. Michelle, on the other hand, was blushing deeply, clutching her handkerchief as she wiped her tears. Thank you, truly. Then, I won't resign. She smiled as she said it. And so, Michelle's resignation was withdrawn, my name was officially cleared, and the harassment allegations were entirely dismissed. As for Michelle, the company began discussing offering her a full-time position. Her dedication as a temp worker, her work ethic, and her courageous stand during the incident were recognized by HR, who convinced Timothy to support her promotion. It was clear that Timothy and the upper management had decided, she's an essential asset to this company. In the early afternoon, during a short break, I ran into Michelle in the hallway. Blushing slightly, she said to me, "Tyler, I'll do my best from now on. It might be harder than when I was a temp, but you've got this. And hey, I'm not backing down either. Also." She fidgeted nervously before continuing. This time, would you go out with me? Just the two of us. Of course. We naturally smiled at each other. The chaos that began at that group mixer had finally come to an end, though I never expected it to end this way. But this wasn't the conclusion, it was the true beginning. Both of us had taken our first steps toward something new. Like stepping out of the darkness into the warmth of the light. Awkward as I may be, I've come to know the joy and responsibility of trusting someone. From here on out, I want to walk this path together with her.